So we're going to go over the digestive system for the digestive system lab. And this is a picture of our model of the entire digestive system. We're going to go through it piece by piece. We're going to start with the upper part, the oral cavity. So I hope everyone is familiar with the oral cavity. That's the mouth. We looked before at this cavity called the nasal cavity. So now we're looking at the oral cavity. There's some structures in there. Most of them you will know or should know. You should know what the tongue is. You should know what teeth are. And you should know what lips are. On this, the cheeks have been taken out since it's a mid-sagittal view. One of the things that you might not know is this term called a vestibule. And all it is the little area between where your teeth and your gums are and either where your lip is or your cheek. All right, so the little, hopefully no one chews or dips, but if you do or know anyone that does, that's where they put their dip, is in the vestibule. Now this is the area where we're going to go through mechanical digestion, chewing food and breaking it down. And this is where we're going to see the first set of our what we call accessory organs. So the whole digestive system is this tube called the Alimentary Canal or the GI tract. And then you're going to have associated of organs called association organs, associated organs, accessory organs, I should say, that are going to be providing either lubricant or like mucus or enzymes that are going to break down the food. And this is where we're going to see our first couple of accessory organs in the oral cavity. These accessory organs are known as salivary glands, right up here in the top left. So there are 3 salivary glands you need to know. The very first one is called the parotid gland. The parotid gland is the largest of the 3, and the word actually means para-otic, even though it's not spelled like that, but that's what the word means, para-otic, which if we spoke that language, we would know it means around the ear. And so the parotid gland is this really large salivary gland around the ear. And if you've ever seen like a key lime pie or a sweet tart or something that gets your mouth kind of puckered up, generally it's the parotid gland that does that. The other 2 are going to be well named. They're going to be named for where they are. The first one is called the submandibular gland, which is underneath this bone that would be here called the mandible. So the submandibular gland, again, pretty well named. And then its counterpart, another one well named, sublingual gland. It is going to be directly under the tongue. So we've got the 3 glands, the parotid gland, the largest one and the closest to the ear. And then we have the submandibular and again the sublingual. Now if I did a cross section of the salivary glands, there's going to be 3 structures you'd need to know. Those structures are, 1, serous cells. Right? So all of the cells in and around are called serous cells. They're going to be secreting enzymes in a watery solution. Then I'm going to have intermixed with it mucus cells. Again, usually mucus cells are called goblet cells, and they're kind of clear, and they're pretty obvious on this. And then finally, the last thing is a structure, and it is called a salivary duct. Again, this should kind of remind you of the simple columnar or simple cuboidal cells that we looked at back in 210 around the kidney tubules. So those are the 3 things that you should be able to identify in a cross-section of a salivary gland. Now, the salivary glands are going to look different from one to the other. This one's going to pretty much be a parotid gland, but you're not going to have to know that right now. I just want you to be able to know and identify these 3 things, 2 types of cells and 1 structure, which is called a duct. Now the salivary glands, as we chew and we mix the food in our oral cavity, the salivary glands are going to be secreting their substance in that. And then we're going to swallow it. And it's going to go into this tube we've looked at in the respiratory system. This is called the pharynx. and it's divided up into three areas: the nasopharynx, the oropharynx, and the laryngenopharynx. Again, the oral pharynx is named that because it's behind the oral cavity. This is where the digestive tract generally starts. The nasopharynx is pretty much considered a respiratory portion only. Hopefully you don't eat through your nose. As I go to swallow my food and as I chew it, it will be called a bolus. And so as I swallow this bolus, it will enter into the oropharynx, and it's going to get to this spot, the laryngenopharynx, where it has to make a decision. Now, this is the epiglottis. It should close down and cover up the passageway to the larynx and the trachea. And so the bolus will now go down what we call the esophagus. The esophagus is simply a muscular tube that leads to the stomach. Now here we have a cross-section of the model of the stomach. The stomach is a J-shaped pouch, as it's described in lecture, that is designed to have an area to be able to fill up and hold food as we slowly, piece by piece, let it, or section by section, let it start to go down into the small intestines. Now there are several parts to the stomach. This is kind of crazy as it's all written up, so I'm going to use this next slide and then point to things as I go along. Now, this is the esophagus coming in. As it comes in, there's going to be a sphincter, which is just a round muscle here that's going to be protecting the contents of the stomach from getting back into the esophagus. So the esophagus will enter through this little area. Again, it's called the lower esophageal or the gastroesophageal sphincter. When it enters, the first place it enters, this little area is called the cardiac region, right? Now the cardiac region, there's four different regions in the heart. The cardiac region, or the cardia, if some places leave this C out, but either one is correct. This cardia or cardiac region is simply the entryway. Then we're going to have this little area, if I can draw a little level line, this is called the fundic region, all right, or the fundus. It is going to be, and on x-rays, you'll see that it shows up as this dark bubble a lot of times where the gas pocket is in there. So we've got the cardia, or the cardiac region, and the fundic region, or the fundus. And then we have the last two. If I go all the way down to this distal end, there's a spot where you can kind of see how everything kind of narrows down. Where it narrows down, this is called the pyloric section. So the pyloric region is going to be right in here. And then everything else, so I'm going to kind of draw this without labeling this, but all of this in here is the body, the region that we call the body of the stomach. So those are the four regions, all right? So we have the cardia, the cardiac, the fundus up here, the body, which is this large one, and then the pyloric region here. All right, so those are the regions. We did look at one of the sphincters, because we have a sphincter up at the top called the lower esophageal or the gastroesophageal sphincter here. But we also have another sphincter that's going to be at the distal end. So we've got a sphincter that's here called the pyloric sphincter. And it's named because it's in the pyloric region, right? So the pyloric region right here. Now the last couple of things, there's going to be names for the inner and outer curve. And they're called the lesser curvature because it is smaller. And then this outer one is called the greater curvature because it is larger. The last thing is going to be these ridges that are inside of the stomach. And you can kind of see them all through here. They're just kind of wrinkles. These are called rugae. Rugae is simply the name for all of these little folds. Sometimes they're called gastric folds. And what they're designed to do is as I eat, they allow for the stomach to be able to stretch. So kind of like curtains on like if you've ever been to a theater or a movie theater that has curtains that draw back, when it's closed, they're relatively tight. There are still some ridges in them, but when they get pulled back, you'll see pleats, these ridges that go through. And that's exactly what rugae are. The rugae are simply just ridges in the stomach that allow the stomach to expand. Now from the stomach, and this is the area where the pyloric sphincter is. So this is the start right here of the large intestines. Now you can see the large intestines is all over the place in here. And now I'm not going to name different parts to it, but you do need to know that there are 3 sections of the small intestines. They are the duodenum is the first one. The jejunum is the second section, the middle section, and the ileum is the distal section, or the end. Now, I do expect you to know that this is the duodenum because that's the beginning, which is where the stomach is. And then this little area here is the ileum because this is the last part of the small intestines. So 2 things. I do expect you to know them in order. So you do need to know duodenum, jejunum, and ileum. And the duodenum, I do expect you to be able to label, to answer if I label, as well as the ileum, the first and the last. All right. Now, where the duodenum is, we're going to see that there are 3 big accessory organs that come in. We're going to look at one called the gallbladder here, the liver, which is all around it. Gallbladder is always associated with the liver. And then this one here called the pancreas. All right, this is a model that shows it. This is the stomach. This would be the duodenum. And so this is where we have the liver, the gallbladder, and the pancreas. Right. Now these 3 are going to produce different enzymes and chemicals that are going to be designed to help break down food as it has been pushed through this area. So now we talked about bolus being what we've chewed. As it gets into the stomach and it starts mixing with the gastric fluid, the gastric juice it's called, it will be called chyme. And so as the chyme starts going through the duodenum, there's going to be a real special area that all 3 of these are going to dump their secretions out into the chyme or onto the chyme. Now, first understand that the liver has a bunch of different things that it's doing. But one of the main things is it's for us here right now is it's producing something called bile. And bile will be stored in the gallbladder. All right. So as it's producing bile, it's going to be pushed out on this little duct here. And this duct is going to be called the common hepatic duct. Hepatic means liver, so it's the duct that's leaving the liver. It is going to join the duct that is leaving the gallbladder when this is called the cystic duct. Cystic or cystitis refers to the gallbladder. Where these 2 join at this point, from that on, it is simply called the common bile duct because it's just carrying bile. Now it's the common bile duct until it gets right here where it's about to join and leave to go out into the duodenum, and it is going to meet up with this little duct that's running through the pancreas, which has a very complicated name. It is called the pancreatic duct. Woo. Well, the pancreatic duct and the common bile duct will join for a short period of time here, and this is referred to as the hepatopancreatic ampulla. Remember, ampulla is simply a word that means larger than normal duct. Where 2 or more ducts join together, it usually is going to be larger for a small portion of time, and so it is called an ampulla. Now, these things will be all working together to put their substances on the chyme to help it break down. So let's look at it in another picture, or as another labeled thing. This is one that's going to be labeled. And now let's look at the picture. There we go. So this is the same thing. This is the picture. The picture does have a few more ducts in it. Understand, I'm not worried about anything on this side of this line. So I've got the common hepatic duct, right, that's going to be joining the cystic duct, which is coming from the gallbladder. At that point, those 2 merge and they form what is the common bile duct. And the common bile duct is going to go all the way down here until it joins with the pancreatic duct. And there at that little spot, it's going to have a larger than normal section, and it's called the hepatopancreatic ampulla. Hepato meaning liver, it's coming from the liver. Pancreas coming from the pancreas. And that is going to release this substance into the chyme. So there are, going back, let me erase some of this stuff that I've got written here, and I'm just going to point to the ducts that you need to know. So there's only a few, right? The common hepatic duct, which is leaving the liver. The cystic duct, which is coming from the gallbladder. Where they join, it is now referred to as the common bile duct. The common bile duct is going to join the pancreatic duct, which is running through the pancreas. And at this point, where they join together for a brief period of time, it is called the hepatopancreatic ampulla. All right, so those are the 4 ducts that you need to know. So now we're going to look at, as this ileum comes in and empties into the large intestines, there is going to be another sphincter here. So we had a sphincter up here called the lower esophageal sphincter, or the gastroesophageal sphincter. We had one here called the pyloric sphincter. And then now we've got one here, and it is between the ileum and the large intestines. Now we're going to learn that this little pocket right here, this dead end pouch, is called the cecum. So this sphincter is called the ileocecal sphincter. Again, it is in your notes. The student handouts has it on there, so hopefully you'll be able to find that. So the ileocecal sphincter is the dividing between the small intestines and the large intestines. Now, like I said, this little dead end pouch here is called the cecum, and off of the cecum is where you'll find this little thing that we looked at in the lymphatic system called the appendix. Right? The appendix is off of the cecum. Now, from the cecum, I'm going to have a part of my intestines, my large intestines, that goes up. This is called the ascending colon. Then I'll have a part of it that is going to go across. This is called the transverse colon, straight from the fact that the plane of the body that goes straight across is the transverse plane. Then I'm going to have a section of the large intestines that's going to go down, and that is called the descending colon. So those should be relatively easy. The last one is simply an area to get things lined up with the midline to get to the opening, right? So this is called the sigmoid colon, and it's called a sigmoid colon because it's going to make kind of this weird S as it's coming through there. Now, those 4 parts I hope are okay. What I will say is there are 2 areas that you'll need to know as well. There's going to have these little areas that they call and refer to as flexures. On this side, right here where the flexure is, and this is going to be on the right side, it is just underneath this big organ that is called the liver, the largest internal organ. The liver is referred to as the hepatic organ. So the flexure right here is called the hepatic flexure. The flexure that is on this side is right next to this organ that we call the spleen. So this flexure is called the splenic flexure, and you'll have to know both of those. All right. So if I erase some of this stuff as we go along, we're going to look at now, as this sigmoid colon comes in here, we're going to have what we call the rectum, followed by the external exit point called the anus. Now, throughout the gastrointestinal tract, the alimentary canal, there are 4 layers. We're going to have, and these, I'm looking at 3 different sections along the alimentary canal, but the sections are going to be, or the layers are going to be the mucosa, a little area called the submucosa, another area called the muscularis, where the muscles are, and then this brief layer on the outside that separates everything from the tissues around it called the serosa. And a little hint, the serosa on the alimentary canal that's below the diaphragm is referred to as the visceral peritoneum, right? The outer layer. We learned this in 210. So of these 4 layers, a big key on some of this stuff is going to be this muscularis. The muscularis all along the alimentary canal is going to have 2 layers. These 2 layers are what is going to allow for us to move food through this long tube. The only area that's different is going to be the stomach. In the stomach, I'm going to have 3 layers, right? And you can see them here. 1, 2, 3. The stomach's going to have a special layer called the oblique layer, and it's designed to help churn the stomach, get it to mix things up. So these are 3 sections. Now I would only worry about the ones up here. I am not going to worry about these guys. Press the wrong button, but I'm not going to worry about the actual pictures. But what I want you to be able to do is to tell me whether these 3 are from one's from the stomach, one's from the small intestine, one's from the large intestines. The way to tell the difference, and again, kind of like with anything that has 3, we looked at this in the cervical spine. If you can get 2 questions that will be specific, a question that's specific for one area, if you can just have 2 of them, it divides everything completely. So there's only one area where there's going to be 3 layers of muscle. So if you see a picture and you count 1, 2, 3 layers of muscle, it is the stomach. You don't have to worry about anything else. It's the stomach. If you don't, and you only have these 2 muscles, 2 layers, as in those 2, now I know it's not the stomach, and I've got to determine whether it's the small or large intestines. And the way to look is the small intestines, the mucosa, is going to have these finger-like things that we call villi. And they are very prominent. They're all about increasing surface area, because the small intestines for absorption's all about surface area. Where you can kind of see, if I drew a little line here, all of this is under the floor of the large intestines. The large intestines just simply has pores, because the large intestines is mainly about extracting the water. So if we do not have the 3 muscle layers from the stomach, and we're trying to determine which one I'm looking at, whether it's small intestines or large intestines, if it has finger-like extensions here on the surface, it's the small intestines. If it has a floor with just little pores in it, that's the large. So this is the overall view. The last thing we didn't talk about here, the anus being the exit for the alimentary canal. There are 2 sphincters here at the anus. You have an internal and external sphincter. The internal sphincter is involuntarily controlled. It is your body letting you know, hey, it is time to go. The external anal sphincter is the one that you have conscious control over. It is the one that'll let you get to where you need to go. So that is the digestive system in lab. I hope that was clear.